Alien Isolation takes place in the now iconic Alien film franchise universe. However, unlike many of its predecessors, this video game attempts to pay homage to the original film and less of the action-packed sequels. Alien Isolation follows the story of Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter, whom after the disappearance of her mother is searching for answers as to what happened to her, why she never returned home. When the game starts, Amanda is around the same age as Ripley was, well, her mother, from the first movie. And likewise, she is working for Weyland Yutani, the infamous corporate giant that also her mother was working before she mysteriously disappeared. I should also note that in this timeline, the second Aliens movie has yet to take place, and all events that take place in-game are actually canon with the film franchise. There are no diversions. It comes to Amanda's attention that a possible lead on her mother's whereabouts has been discovered, and she is sent with representatives of Weyland to Sevastopol Station, run by a rival company, to attempt to negotiate for the whereabouts of the Nostromo, the ship detonated in the original Alien movie. Needless to say, things go downhill rather quickly after the arrival on the now almost derelict station, and through some bad circumstances and rather awful luck, Amanda quickly finds herself alone, thrown into a game of survival to find out the truth of her mother's disappearance and make it off the station alive, as we do come to find out that there's something alien stalking the corridors of Sevastopol. In the beginning, Alien Isolation does a great job of pacing the suspense, and the reveal of the alien and its capabilities is truly horrifying the first time you come across it. And in fact, most encounters with the alien do in fact dredge up this feeling of dread for many hours to come. But we are slightly getting ahead of ourselves here, and we should talk about the basic gameplay before we get into any critique I might have for this title. As far as the narrative of Alien Isolation is concerned, the first few hours were very strong, I would say. I'm not going to try to reveal too much because some people may want to actually play the game or watch one of my playthroughs that I just recently did and see for yourself how it unfolds. Now, it unfolds typically like a standard horror movie. They followed the format completely. There's lots of mystique. There's a lot of strange disappearances and noises and jump scares and all that kind of thing early on in the game, which really does dredge up the amount of suspense that you can have. Now, the problem is, the reason why a movie works so well is because they're only maybe 2 hours long. 2.5, depending. Your average horror movie should be about 1.5 to 2 hours long. And you can only stay in suspense for so long before it stops being suspenseful. And that seems to be the problem with Alien Isolation as far as the story is concerned. The story it's interesting. It's your standard alien plotline. You go on the mysterious ship. You're looking for a way off the ship after you investigate some kind of occurrence. All very standard procedure. The problem is that it dredges on for upwards of 15 hours, I would say. I would say the average playthrough is around 15 hours from what I have read as far as statistics go. And trying to channel that same primal fear for 15 hours is damn near impossible. And they did a good job of it up to a certain point. There's a certain point in the game where it just stops being suspenseful. It's sad, but true. And it does pick up at the end. The ending has a lot more suspense to it. But there's a good chunk of gameplay that is just kind of flat, honestly. It kind of almost doesn't know what it wants to do with itself. And the story doesn't make a lot of sense when it comes to certain aspects. There's a lot of plot holes, I guess you would call them. So it is what it is. But on a whole, I did enjoy the story they told because it is a very familiar story and I could see where they were going with it. It's not something brand new. It's not something with a dramatic twist, although there is a slight twist to the narrative. But overall, nothing you shouldn't expect from your standard horror movie, and therefore, you can see the writing on the wall relatively early when you, as long as you've seen in the Alien movies, you know what's going to happen at the end of the game. But that's enough about that. Let's move on to actual gameplay. From a gameplay standpoint, Alien Isolation is definitely a survival horror game that dips its toe into a first-person shooter. For this reason, despite you obtaining quite a few weapons, the emphasis is heavily encouraged upon stealth to both survive enemy encounters and further the plot. This is due mostly to the fact that the main antagonist, the alien, is unkillable. Similar to the original film, nothing short of blowing it out an airlock or detonating massive amounts of explosives will harm it. Since you do not have access to these methods for, I would say, the majority of the game, most of your time will be spent cowering in air ducts, under tables, and in lockers, hoping that this killing machine will pass you by. To aid you in your stealth endeavors, Creative Assembly has gone to great lengths to recreate the iconic motion tracker, which has all the bells and whistles we see in the film franchise. With this tool in hand, you can hear the enemies coming and get a rough idea of their location, even through walls and floors. This, of course, leads to many tense situations, as you are not always sure if an enemy is standing right on the other side of a door or possibly hiding in a vent above you. So the fearful immersion is not broken, and the game feels less cheap, as you do in fact have tools at your disposal to possibly avoid any and all threats. In the same vein, there is a rather limited crafting mechanic that will allow you to make noise machines and smoke grenades, all in an effort to either divert attention or obscure your presence from the perfect killing machine. But you are encouraged to not use the same tricks too often, as much like its movie counterpart, the alien will learn from your tactics and adapt, forcing you to utilize multiple methods to escape its clutches. The other half of gameplay is that of small minigame puzzles utilized to make opening a door or turning on a generator more interesting, and the actual combat encounters that you can engage in with enemies that actually die. The puzzles are rather simple, mostly time-based or matching games that break up the monotony of traversing the massive Sevastopol station. The actual combat encounters can either be from terrified survivors shooting at everything that moves, to the infamous murder intent average Joe androids. In fact, a large portion of Alien Isolation drops you into a sole encounter with these machines without the presence of the alien. The Joes are tough and must be taken down with headshots or bludgeoned to death after an electrical stun. However, this is where Alien Isolation begins to lose some points with me personally. The game is built as a survival horror game, and the shooting portions that you are forced into seem like the developers just wanted to actually use the damn near useless guns that they give you 10 hours ago, as most of the time it is almost impossible to sneak by the sheer amount of androids, and there are portions that can only be resolved with combat, and the combat is not the best I've ever seen. The hit detection is not exactly the greatest with the stun rod, and you have to be very carefully aiming and wait between firing your ranged weapons, as the weapons have a rather high chance of missing your target if you are not completely still and wait for the recoil to subside. Granted, this does make some of these encounters more intense, but it is not for the right reasons, in my opinion. It has more to do with frustration than the genuine fear I believe the developers were going for. And for the most part, I would agree with this style of discouraging shooting in a primarily stealth-oriented game. But when you are forced to break stealth and not given many other options to handle situations, the gun combat just feels weak and lackluster. And then there is the flamethrower. The all-seeing alien, which as the game goes on seems to be always hunting only you and no one else, becomes a significantly less of a threat, as a few bursts from the flamethrower will just scare it off. Now, CA has done a good job of making you feel like the flamethrower is your last lifeline, and you should use it sparingly. But by the end of the game, that is thrown completely to the wind, as fuel is plentiful and encouraged to use. As soon as you get a hold of the flamethrower, encounters with the alien just don't have the same terror about them, because you now have something that will drive it off, completely negating the fear factor when you come across an alien. But if Creative Assembly did get one thing very right about Alien Isolation, it is the ambience. Everything from level design to sound has been painstakingly pulled from the movies and realized throughout the entire game. The entire feel is that of an 80s sci-fi horror film. From the bulky padded rooms to the almost VHS quality graphics of the computer screens and the old-fashioned telephones that are lining the walls as a thing of the past. The team spent a lot of time recreating this ambience, and it shows. You do feel like you have been taken back into time to this grungy style of what the future could be. But by far the soundtrack and noises of Alien Isolation steal the show. The alien sounds identical to the movies, and the motion tracker is spot on, as well as the expertly crafted music, which will have you on edge for the majority of the game when there's no danger even in sight. In fact, on a whole, I would say that Alien Isolation does an excellent job of using sound to convey its intentions, more so than most of the modern games I've seen recently coming out. And this highlights something very personal to me, in that you don't always need to show everything to dredge up an emotion. And Alien Isolation does this very well. There you get that sense of loneliness and that sense of despair through the music and the tone that they've set in the setting. And that is something not very many games can accomplish. And if there's one thing to take away from this game, it has done that very well. Now, as a whole, Alien Isolation is a love letter to classic horror fans and a faithful recreation of the original film it was based off of, with a few Easter eggs for die-hard fans. It is not perfect by any means, but it does inspire fear and very much transports you directly into the Alien universe. This is, however, fallen short by several lackluster mechanics and a storyline that doesn't seem to know where it's going at times. The constant backtracking and length of the game may actually have worked against it, as Alien Isolation clocks in around 15 hours. And that is an extremely long time to keep the same scare going, which defeats the purpose of what I believe it was trying to accomplish. However, the unpredictable alien AI does add some replay value and does up the scare factor. But once you have seen the scares once, it kind of loses its appeal. On a whole, I would recommend this game to fans of survival horror, and certainly fans of the Alien film franchise. But due to some technical aspects and wonky mechanics, I am giving Alien Isolation a 7 out of 10. I have been Jumbo Thick. Thank you guys for watching my in-depth review of Alien Isolation, and I hope to see you all very soon. Have a good day.